I'm a timeline kind of person. I always have been. Ever since I sold my soul to the Five Nights at Freddy's lore, my biggest interest was always in what happened when. Many years ago, I think 6 or 7 at this point, I even made a 90-minute timeline video, but then deleted it because it was made when only the first 4 games were out, and people kept complaining in the comments that I ignored Sister Location. I don't actually have the video anywhere, so I guess it's technically lost media now. Not that I'm complaining, let's please keep it lost. But I remember the basics of it, and from what I remember, it was pretty terrible. I was basically just taking whatever ideas I liked and trying to force them to work, rather than asking myself how likely anything really was. And after all this time, I want to try this out again. Call it a redemption arc, if you will. In this video, and the ones after it, because I'd rather make multiple parts than drop a 90-minute video out of nowhere again, I'm going to put together what I think the timeline is probably supposed to be, with the occasional headcanon to fill in some blanks. I'm gonna try not to let headcanon overrule any established or implied information, though, and I'll try not to have any contradictions, but that's kind of impossible given how many contradictions Scott lets slide through. And that's not just me rage quitting, that's just an established fact at this point. Before we jump in, though, I'm gonna let everyone know what they need to be aware of in order to understand this video. Basically, if you haven't played or watched all of the games, except the joke games like Fury's Rage, those don't really matter here, or you don't have at least vague knowledge about the novels, Fazbear Frights, and Tales from the Pizzaplex books, you'll probably have no idea what I'm talking about half the time. I'll also be skipping over a small section of the timeline because I already talked about it in another video, which I'll link once right now, and then again when the topic comes up later. I'll try to explain stuff enough for casual fans to be able to maybe sort of follow along, but if I try to make this understandable for total newcomers, it'll take at least 10 hours, and sadly I don't have the time or energy to edit a 10-hour video series. And with that, our story begins in... Okay, we've already hit a roadblock. When was Fredbear's singing show? It looks like something out of the 1920s or 30s. But none of our cast of characters should even be alive by that point. What I'd want to do is place it in the mid-70s, with it being Henry's first project before the diner, but the art style so heavily pushes against that idea. So I'm gonna compromise and say it's in the 40s or 50s, early enough for the art to make some sort of sense, but late enough for Henry and or William to be alive to see it. Regardless of whether Henry and William made this place, or bought the rights to the character long after, this place is most likely where they developed their lifeline interest in robotics, and what inspired them to make Fredbear's Family Diner. But before we can get into that, we need to take a step aside for a moment to talk about something important that will lay some heavy groundwork for us moving forward. There's an interesting note in the Ultimate Guide that Game Theory once called out. The books offer a closer peek at Henry and William Afton, how their partnership flourished early on, and how their view of the animatronics evolved over time. Thoughtful fans might want to give these sections a closer look. It's very rare for us to be directly told where to look for information to solve the story. In fact, the only other time I can think of where this happened is when Scott gave that hint about the tiny toy Chica. So despite the novels being an alternate universe, and despite Scott's early claims that we couldn't use them to solve anything, the Silver Eyes trilogy is going to play an important part in interpreting both the early timeline and the actions of Henry and William as we move along. With that in mind, let's take a look at Henry and William's early days as we see them in the novels. Afton seemed like the normal one in the venture, the businessman. Henry was the artist. He always seemed to be off in another world, some part of his mind thinking about his mechanical creatures, even when he was holding a conversation about the weather or the kids' soccer games. William Afton was the one who made Freddy's a business, as he had the previous restaurant. Afton was as robust and lively as Henry was withdrawn and shadowy. So in the beginning, Henry was the engineer, and William was the businessman. But later on in the books, William became an engineer who was capable of even more than Henry was. What caused this change in the novels? Charlotte's death. Her death and its aftermath are the inciting incident of the novel trilogy, so it would stand to reason that the same thing happened in the games. But this already is where the two stories diverge. In the novels, Charlotte's soul moves on, and Henry builds robotic replicas that William becomes jealous of, causing him to create living animatronics of his own. But in the games, that doesn't happen. Charlotte possesses the puppet, the Fredbear and Freddy split that I talked about in my Fredbear video happens, and the closest thing we get to the Charlie bots is an Ella alarm clock. This radically changes William's entire motive going forward, which is important to keep in mind, because this jealousy of Henry shouldn't exist in the games. Henry didn't perform the unbelievable feats he did in the novels. So, what led William to commit the same atrocities in the games? Why did he build Baby? Why did he kill the children? Because of the puppet? No, probably not. In the fourth closet, we learn that William isn't all that impressed by this.
Anyone can discover a fire already burning, but Henry found a unique spark. He created something truly different. Something he didn't deserve or intend to stumble upon.
William in the novels was after this spark. That was the driving force behind every action he took, at least after killing Charlotte. And given that he does the same things in the games, he should be after the same thing. But Henry never brought his attention to this spark's existence. There is a certain someone who possesses strange abilities that William wants to replicate, though. His own son, who is nowhere to be seen in the novels. I believe that the crying child takes Henry's place as the inspiration for all of his crimes after Charlotte's murder. For proof, we can look to all the things that were once used as evidence for dream theory. The pigtail girl talks about the night guards dying before it happens. The crying child sees the shadows before they should exist. The 5 plushies reflect the 5 animatronics in the first game. And, well, everything else in MatPat's Dream Theory video, basically. All of these things that the kids saw manifested in reality. This is an unbelievable power. In fact, it's so unbelievable that a lot of you watching probably don't believe me. Well, allow me to vouch for my sanity with a bombardment of examples of characters manifesting their own thoughts and emotions into reality. Henry brought the Ella ragdoll to life by pouring his grief into it and believing it was Charlotte. Granny Foster in What We Found could predict the future and influence reality, simply because she believed that she could. Matt in the Flesh brings a piece of code to life with his anger and speculates that the code willed itself into reality. Phineas Taggart creates crystals out of his own thoughts in the 3rd Stitch Wraith Stinger. Greg and Kimberly influence a random number generator, among other things, with the power of their minds in Fetch. Edwin pours his agony into the Mimic and brings it to life. The belief that a toy doll was Jake's real body led his soul to inhabit the doll after death in the real Jake. Hopefully that's enough proof. Now that I've gotten that tangent out of the way, let's zoom out here and actually start putting together a timeline. Since this is in fact a timeline video, despite this being page 3 of the script and still having almost nothing to show for it. In the mid-1900s, probably, someone makes Fredbear's Singin' Show. This leads Henry and William to make Fredbear's Family Diner. In 1982 or 1983, Henry's daughter Charlotte is killed outside of Fredbear's, and the location closes. In 1983, the restaurant splits in 2. There is now a newly rebranded Fredbear's Family Diner, which features the yellow Fredbear and is primarily run by William Afton, and a highly successful pizzeria called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, primarily run by Henry Emily. Together, these characters form a massive franchise that takes the country by storm. Within this same year, it spawns several toy lines and a television show. While all this is happening, William starts running fear experiments, attempting to tap into the well of emotional energy that is his youngest son. His older son, Mike, gets a little too into it, leading to the Bite of 83, which gets Fredbear's Family Diner closed for good. Fredbear himself gets to stick around, but he's relegated to a side gig at the pizzerias and is taken off the TV show. Now Freddy Fazbear is the star of the show instead. Henry and William lean into it, creating the Fazbear Corporation and Fazbear Entertainment. As it turns out, what was originally a tragedy turned into a remarkable business move. Freddy Fazbear and Friends spread like wildfire, with locations popping up all over the place. A lot of them even had their own unique spins on the idea. My favorite is the one with a hide-and-seek maze running through the location that, well, I don't want to spoil that story if you haven't read it, because it's really good. I'm just going to place a pin down right now. Around this time, the Tales from the Pizzaplex story The Mimic takes place. I'm not going to talk about it right now, though, because it doesn't become relevant until way, way later, and I don't want to overcomplicate things. When the time comes, though, I'll return to this pin and explain the details. Anyway, now we get to zoom back in for a while. With all this expansion going on, and with William in need of experiment victims, it seems like the perfect opportunity for a new cast of characters to join the crew. Enter the Funtime animatronics, led by none other than Circus Baby. From down within his underground testing facility, William designs these state-of-the-art robots that can dispense ice cream, inflate balloons, and more importantly, lure and kidnap children. Why? Because, now that his original experiment victim is dead, he needs new ones. And what better way to lure them in than with some new robotic friends? Excitement builds when the new location, Circus Baby's Pizza World, begins construction. When opening day approaches, William Afton lets some children come to test the attractions. One of these kids is his own daughter, Elizabeth. When Elizabeth walks up to Circus Baby, she gets kidnapped, and the animatronic parts within the robot kill her. She ends up possessing Baby, and William takes notice. Now, I have to take a second to diverge from common consensus for a second. I don't think Baby was designed to kill children. I think that, like Funtime Freddy, she was just meant to capture them for experiments. Why do I think that? Let's go back to that quote I brought up earlier, the one about Henry and William. The books offer a closer look at Henry and William and how their view of the animatronics changed over time. These sections impact the story of the games as well. In the novels, Elizabeth's death was an accident. Baby was built to capture children, not kill them. William himself refers to the incident as an accident that he used as a learning experience.
Everyone dies.
Afton reached up and touched the mechanical girl's cheek, then turned his attention back to Jessica.
The most terrible accidents sometimes bear the most beautiful fruits,
He said, as if to himself.
Recreating the accident. That is the duty and the honor of science. To replicate the experiment, obtain the same result.
In this section, he clearly notes Elizabeth's death as an accident and goes on to say that it's one he wants to replicate. That leads me to believe that this incident, not Charlotte's possession of the puppet, is what keys William into the fact that souls can possess animatronics. After all, if he knew that fact from the moment the puppet started acting different, why would he wait 2 to 3 years to use that knowledge for anything? And why would the franchise never even once make reference to William even acknowledging the puppet's existence? Another reason I place this incident before the murders of the children is because Circus Baby's Pizza World had a springlock suit, one that was used incorrectly and caused them to be deemed too dangerous. This sounds suspiciously similar to the incident we learned happened at a sister location shortly before the missing children incident.
After learning of an unfortunate incident at the sister location involving multiple and simultaneous spring lock failures, the company has deemed the suit temporarily unfit for employees.
Then, after that tape, we get 2 tapes alluding to the fact that the missing children incident is taking place.
Under no circumstance should a customer ever be taken into this room and out of the main show area. Management has also been made aware that the Spring Bonnie animatronic has been noticeably moved. The previously mentioned safe rooms are being sealed at most locations, including this one. Management also requests that this room not be mentioned to family, friends, or insurance representatives.
June 26th, 1985. The date that the children are lured to their death. There are arguments about whether this incident took place over the course of 1 or several days, but by reading the newspapers carefully, we can see that it did in fact happen in 1 day. The first newspaper says that 2 kids are reported missing, and the suspect was caught the day after it happened. The second newspaper says that 5 kids have now been reported missing, and the suspect has been caught. That doesn't mean William killed 2 kids, got caught, killed 3 more kids, and got caught again. It just means that 5 kids went missing, 2 got reported by the next morning, and 2 weren't reported until later that day or the next day. Some parents, especially in the 80s, wouldn't think much about a kid not showing up one night. My dad told me stories about his childhood where he'd stay at a friend's house overnight without telling his parents, and nobody would worry about it. Another interesting detail is that we know the order that the kids were lured, thanks to some details from Security Breach at Ultimate Custom Night. In Security Breach, we see these balloons: a purple 2, a red 4, and a yellow 5. This is most likely referring to the order in which the kids were killed. Purple for Jeremy, who possesses Bonnie, red for Fritz, who possesses Foxy, and yellow for Cassidy, who possesses Golden Freddy. We also know from Ultimate Custom Night that Susie, who possesses Chica, dies first. That leaves only Gabriel left, which by process of elimination puts him in 3rd place. So the order goes Susie, Jeremy, Gabriel, Fritz, Cassidy. All 5 children were lured to their deaths by William Afton, and stuffed into the animatronics by someone. The second game shows the puppet doing it, but everything after that game implies that William did it, so I'm just gonna say that it was William for now, but I could easily be proven wrong about that. Oh, and Andrew from the Fazbear Frights might be somewhere in this whole mess too. If so, he was probably stuffed into the ball pit or something. We don't know much about him apart from the 50% chance he was there. He's just kind of an afterthought, both in-universe and in a meta sense though, so let's not get too wrapped up in that. After this incident, Fazbear Entertainment tries to sweep things under the rug by sealing off the safe rooms in most locations, with the murder suit sealed inside as well. It doesn't work though, as customers notice blood and mucus oozing from the animatronics. This gets the place shut down, and the rumors spread so quick that the entire restaurant chain goes downhill fast. Over the course of the next few years, maybe even the next few months, the vast majority of Freddy Fazbear locations shut down, to the point that as far as public consciousness goes, this is where Freddy's story ended for the next 4 decades. Alright, this is getting pretty long, and I think this is a good stopping point, so I'll just give a quick recap, because that was a lot of info dumped at one time. Late 1970s, Henry and William make Fredbear's Family Diner. Early 80s, William kills Charlotte. Fredbear and Freddy go through mitosis. Now there are 2 chains. 1983, William starts his fear experiments using his son. The son dies. Fredbear is shoved to the sidelines and Freddy becomes a hit. Early 1985, Circus Baby's Pizza World is created. Baby kills Elizabeth, which teaches William about Remnant. June 26, 1985, William kills 5 or 6 kids and stuffs them into the animatronics. They become possessed. Later in 1985, the location shuts down. Fazbear Entertainment is screwed. And there you go. Maybe I should have said it like that from the beginning and saved you all some time. But hey, I like talking about this stuff. And I know a lot of people like listening to excessively long YouTube videos, so hopefully it's a win-win. Oh, and before you go, you may be wondering why I skipped over the fate of the crying child up to this point. The reason for that is because I'm waiting to see if the movie touches on it. There's a plot point about Mike's little brother disappearing, so we'll have to wait and see how closely that lines up with the crying child. Either way, I'll either start off the next video with my thoughts on where he fits into things, or just make a separate video altogether. But I promise I'm not just gonna forget about him.